Welcome. This is the Backend Bear podcast, where we discuss anything related to programming, algorithms, and the latest practices in the coding world. So sit back, grab a drink, enjoy it, and let's dig right into it. How's it going, people? Hope you're having a great start of the week. You're programming hard and you're trying to get at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep a day. And of course, you can't wait for Friday to come in. This week I had the infamous Joe Zack from the Coding Blocks podcast as a guest. Today we try to answer one of more interesting questions, like what is software development? What is front-end development? What is back-end development? Is there a distinction between those two? What is a full-stack developer? Before, there was a well-known gap between those disciplines, but today it kind of seemed like it all blurred together. And we try to answer that question. Is there a line or is there not? In today's world, we have a lot of third-party libraries and toolkits and all sorts of tools that will help us launch an entire website in just a matter of minutes. That makes our software development life way easier, but it kind of feels that it's making back-end development obsolete. Those tools make all the back-end operations available to you in a couple of clicks. For something more simple or starting your own startup business, it'll work perfectly. But once the user base comes to a level where you would need a bit more data or a bit more research or a bit more specialized data sets, probably then in that case you would need to introduce your custom backend development. Every year there's a new library coming out, a new innovation, a new technology, and it's getting harder and harder to keep up with all of that. And Joe and me are trying to address all of those issues. So sit back, relax, grab a drink, grab my paw, and let's dig right into it. Get ready.
All right.
Let me see if you'll guess the song. So I need a beat. So it's the Joe Zack, and he's the guest on the show. It's the Joe Zack. He's the guest on the show. It's the Joe Zack, and he's the guest on the show. It's the Joe Zack, and he's a guest on the show. Bad code, he'll make the system clean. When it comes to clean code, he's a mean machine. Also, he's a talk show host. Yeah. Podcast from coast to coast. Coding Blocks, it's the Joe Zack, and he's the guest on the show. It's the Joe Zack, and he's the guest on the show.
Oh, thank you very much. It goes great with the intro music you got.
It was hard keeping a straight face, but yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. This is I have Joe Zack with me. He's one of the hosts of Coding Blocks. Codingblocks.net or Coding Blocks?
Coding Blocks and codingblocks.net.
Codingblocks.net. Yeah, and currently he's also working at Bay Dynamics. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but I hope I did. But welcome to the show, Joe. Happy to have you here. So let's kind of kick it off easy. Like, tell us something a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I've been podcasting for a little while, but I'm also a fan of kind of hard rock and metal, and I know you are too. And so I know anytime I listen to a podcast that has a great intro music, I always kind of latch onto that, and it kind of gets bonus points for me. So I also follow you on Twitter, and I've seen some of the pictures that you've posted of your gear recently. So I've been really excited about that. And so I'm also kind of a music nerd, and so it's kind of nice to share that. I think a lot of programmers have that. I know Lee Warwick also recently had a show over at Tech Junior talking about music and programming and the kind of connection there. So, of course, I got to fall right into that.
Yeah, I listened to that. Maybe we should make a band, like all together, make some metal band.
Absolutely,
that would be fun. In a heartbeat. I'm here. I got the equipment, got everything, so we can just rock it out.
I'm ready.
So, what kind of got you into programming? How did it all started?
I've always kind of been a traditional nerd, so no big surprises. I kind of fit the usual molds growing up in the 80s and just kind of being around like Nintendo and stuff. So of course I wanted to make video games, and the school I went to didn't really have a lot of computers. Like that's how long ago it was. But there was one in the library where I kind of got to mess around a little bit with Lego Logo, which was where you could plug a Lego set into the computer and kind of like drive a little motor. So I guess it's like kind of way predating the new Lego stuff. I forget what they call it, Mindstorm. Anyway, I just had some kind of fun with that, and that was my first kind of experience, really kind of typing things into the computer and watching things go. And I guess I was kind of hooked after that. And I tried to do a couple other things in college that I was kind of interested in, but programming just kind of fit naturally with the kind of things that I like doing anyway. So it just kind of seemed like a natural fit.
Yeah, we all started like I don't know, even I as a kid, like I always wanted to build video games. And I remember like when I was 2 years old, I think my father brought in the Commodore 64, and it had like those 5.5-inch floppies, the big ones. So I was
Yeah.
main guy on the street. So, but you kind of, I remember loading the games, and you're like load, and then name the file, and then run, and then so that was my first like contact, and I always kind of wanted to write games. But yeah, that's great to hear. Um, so you've been in the industry quite a while, like same as I, and you kind of went through the traditional schooling. And I don't know, by now, can you tell me, like, what is the best team structure to you? So if you had, like, if you can create a team, as many developers as you want, what would be your ideal, like, structure? And
Yeah, sure.
the types of developers you would have, and something along those lines.
I've always had the best experiences with small teams. Have you ever heard the term two pizza teams?
No, I haven't.
I think it was an Amazon thing where somebody kind of figured out at some point like the optimum team size for their organization was basically however many people would take to eat two pizzas. So if they had to call them lunch or dinner, and so I think it ends up being it depends on the people. Like I can eat a lot of pizza, but call it like 10 people. Is any more than that, it just kind of gets hard, and you get some stuff lost in translation. So if you can keep your organization limited to kind of those smaller groups, and I've had better experiences with that. I know that's probably impractical for a lot of organizations, and just ones I've never been able to experience. And so I don't know how well that translates to really really large organizations where you could end up with like I don't know thousands of teams. I think I heard once I want to say 18,000 developers on Microsoft, but I might have just made that up. But
Jeez.
that's a lot of pizzas.
Yeah, it's a lot of pizzas. If they're, especially that's a lot of teams if they're making pizza teams. But I don't know. I mean, the way I don't know. I also kind of did a lot of, different size teams. When I started off, we were in a team of 40 developers, and we were kind of split up across the teams, and we were even, not even in the same country, so we were kind of different countries. But it was always like up to 10, but we kind of all worked together. And I don't know. To me, it's a smaller team. I agree with you on that one. Smaller team is way more productive. So if you had to pick in that team, like how many like backend developers, how many UI developers, or full stack, how many 10x developers you would have in that?
10x developers, definitely. No, I'm a big fan of team players, so hopefully, no, I prefer not to have 10x developers. Less cowboy coding in my experience is a little bit better. I like to have a little bit more discipline once you start working with more people, and different strokes for different folks and different teams and different situations, of course. But I like to have small groups, and I like to have some people that can kind of play the field. I know there's a lot of kind of controversy around the term like full stack developer, and I won't dive into all that. You can Google and see all the arguments on both sides of that fence. But I do like to have a couple generalists, people that can fill in any role, especially if you're talking about a small team, and you can't have like 10 very niche specialists who only work on their little silos because somebody calls in sick or something and something bad happens. Someone needs to be able to pick that up. And so I don't like the not my job attitude. And so I prefer to work with people that are a little bit more kind of pliable on that. At the same time, I do think there's a good case to be made for generalists. So depending on how much kind of area you have to cover on your team, I think it'd be nice to even have like 5 kind of call them like middle of the road kind of wide generalists who can complete things from start to finish and work with the stakeholders and get it done and delivered, and then maybe like 5 specialists. So say call it 2 front end and 2 back end, and I don't know, one one based on hiring availability, I guess.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking you that question, I want to kind of come back to it a bit later, but you'll see.
Yeah, I think about it all the time.
So yeah, I was thinking about it, and the topic we're talking about today, it's really interesting. It kind of made me think. Like for the past, like, I don't know, 3-4 days, I've been doing nothing but thinking about it, and just want to pick that and see where we get. And so, how code ethics and code reviews and coding standards, how important would that be to you?
It's really tough. I think it really kind of depends on the project. There's things that I'm willing to forgive and let go that I know, like, by the book. Like if Uncle Bob was here, he'd be slapping me on the wrist. I know that I'm not supposed to say, and I know I'm supposed to say that everything should be fully code coverage and all the winters should be turned on high. But realistically, if you're working on a 2-month project, that may or may not see the light of day, that you need to be really agile on, and that you are closely say iterating on, then I'm willing to let some of that stuff slip. If it's something I expect to be working on a long time, or if that 2-month project suddenly becomes a 2-year project, or it starting to look like it's going to be that way, then that's when I want to bring those kind of controls in. So I'm flexible based on the situation. I've had the opportunity to work in the field in a long time, and got to kind of see a lot of good things, a lot of bad things that have come from being adaptable to the situation. So I try to keep that in mind, and not just kind of stick to the dogma, even though it certainly could be better at it.
That's not a really bad advice. I mean,
Yeah.
I just had like an epiphany moment in my head, because the way, I mean, I started leading teams recently, so doing it for past maybe half a year, right? And then I'm learning a lot along the way, and I'm learning how, to talk to developers, how to address, how to be the lead, team lead, basically. And it has a learning curve, of course. And the way I started it, it was like, I don't even know how, like in an army, like I set up the coding standards, I set up the coding ethics, and I'm like smacking the wrist left and right because they didn't do how Uncle Bob said. By the way, I'm a big Uncle Bob fangirl, apparently. So I love his books. I mean, the way I started is like, my first job, they just gave me the book and said, read it, and then you can check in code. I mean, that's how it started, which is good, I mean, I learned a lot back then. But anyway, so, and I'm forcing them to apply those code ethics and code reviews, but I don't know. Depending on the size of the project, maybe I should kind of alter that view.
Well, I don't know, because I could definitely go the other way with it. Like, for one, it's definitely harder to bring that stuff in later. So for sure, if you can start out with that stuff, it's so much easier to keep the ball rolling. And on the other hand, another way to think about it is I did a bunch of research on like deliberate practice and how people get better at things like art and sports and science and math and chess and all sorts of other stuff. I read all the kind of the cool business books on it, whatever. And some of the takeaways that I took from there was that doing things in a bad way creates bad habits. So if you're constantly being scrappy, doing, like say little one-off side projects for fun on weekends or whatever, and not adhering to strict standards and ways of doing things, well, those bad habits get built and become muscle memory. And so next time you're working without even thinking about it, you might be slipping some of these bad habits in, and those things are hard to undo. So for every time you do the wrong thing, you got to kind of do it right a couple times just to kind of undo that damage, because it's so much easier to do things the wrong way. So I know I just totally counteracted my advice from earlier, but that's the kind of chaos that is my brain. So
yeah, but additionally, I mean, it depends on the people themselves, and I'm getting not a lot of, but I'm getting some pushback on the thing. And the thing is, I mean, the company was smaller before I came in, right? So, and then when I came in, I mean, the development team was small, so then there were no rules set. So it was so we needed kind of to standardize everything. So, and that's also where I came in, where I needed to, move their entire solution, design and architect for the cloud, and then also with that, like set some coding standards. And now that you have like a bunch of, microservices running together, and I kind of was tasked with the mission, like of standardizing, also making coding standards, coding practices, and, documenting everything and stuff like that. So, and I'm just trying to learn that and how to approach developers on that end. How do you deal with bad code in a way? And I'm saying bad, and I'm getting a lot of, in every interview, it's not bad as bad. People like saying it bad, but it's just like not up to standards. Like say non-performant code, right? Or just the variable names are misleading, or the methods are doing more than one thing, right? There's no like single responsibility principles, no like division of concerns and stuff like that. So how do you deal with that?
Not very well, really. I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, and I don't really know that many people that are really doing super great at it. I think everyone struggles with that sort of stuff, and even the stuff that I think I'm doing well at the time, I look back at later and I notice that there's things I don't like, and so I try to be better about it, and I try to be understanding of other people when they do stuff, but I probably am not very good at it. I definitely think poorly of people when I see poor code, which I know I probably shouldn't say or think, but I do try to keep in mind that there are often situations or various other pressures that might be leading to that bad code, and so sometimes you'll see something that looks terrible, but then when you realize it was done the night before at midnight because of some requirements changed to make it through the demo, and because of that demo you got the new client that got your company 3 more months of runway, then suddenly those poorly named functions aren't so bad anymore, and you don't mind that they slipped, pushed off the pull request until after the demo or whatever it was. And so I've got a bit of empathy for that, and yeah, it also bites me too, because there's things that I've kind of forgiven in my own code and kind of let go and excused by saying, well, it was late, or well, they changed the requirements or whatever, and then it came back and bit me when I had to work on it later. So I see it both ways, and I really don't have a good answer other than, I try to read books. I'm a big fan of Uncle Bob's books, just like you are. So I try to read and try to be conscious. So at least I know when I'm making trade-offs, I'm trying to understand the technical debt when I'm making those purchases, so to say. So that's kind of the angle that I'm attacking it from. And some days I do great, and some days I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying also to like encourage other developers to like read, especially Uncle Bob's book. Like read anything. Like don't take my word for it. Just read stuff. And I want someone to like be knowledgeable also about Uncle Bob as well, because I apply some of the rules, but then I forget some, right? And I get into it, and then I would like someone to kind of counteract me on that, like, hey, but Uncle Bob said this and stuff like that. So by all of us having that drive to learn, it'll make the whole system better. I mean, it's like that rotten apple in a basket of apples like story, right? So you have one bad apple, and then it'll turn all the other apples bad, right? But this is kind of inverse. If there's one good apple trying to make all of them round good, it's no good. So we all kind of have to strive and kind of learn. And I always try to encourage them with the counter example. So whenever I run into something like, hey, if you pass number 5 here, then you'll get a null exception because you're division with 0 or something like that. So that's how I approach it. Like I ask them, here's an example, counter example, why this won't work. And then I try to encourage them, like, look, how would you fix it? What would be your idea approach? And then if they're kind of struggling with the solution, then I would be like, hey, might I suggest this? So I think it's, that way I'm kind of trying to teach them along the way also about the benefits of, all of us having clean code and understanding. And like, I want to jump in that part of the system and understand it. But also there are sometimes like when I slip up and I run into a piece of code and I'm like, oh, what the hell is it?
Yeah.
Like, start pulling my own hair. So, but yeah, so same goes, I'm assuming same goes kind of like for testing, the way I approach it, or is it like, do you guys do a lot of tests, or do you guys do tests when you have time for it, or do you guys, constantly try to keep tests even in crunch time?
Yeah, we try to be pragmatic about it. It's really tough though, and especially I've been working with some newer technologies and new to me anyway, and so a lot of the code I've been doing is exploratory, and so and it's integration work too, because I'm bringing in different things, and so when I look back at the code after I kind of figured out how to get it working the first time, how I want to split things up, it depends on kind of what the goal of that project is. If it's to get something out the door that we can not think about it anymore, then maybe that glue is good enough and I won't have to touch it again. But if it's something that I want to then bring into like one of the main products, then absolutely that's something I want to kind of take and slice it up after learning how to do it, and bringing it into the product in a good clean pattern. And I think it's really important that you know those good clean patterns. Like you can't write a prototype and then drop in dependency injection and good logging and good abstractions and interfaces. It's hard to bring that stuff in, especially if you don't have any experience doing things the right way. And so I think a lot of times developers know what bad code looks like, they don't know what good code looks like. And so that's why I like your example there of saying, kind of showing what people, how they can make it better or what they can do to make things good. And so um, I guess that's not really answering your question very much, other than to say like, I'm trying, man, I'm trying.
Yeah, we're all trying. I mean, and that's the point. I mean, we're doing trial and error, and like for me, this whole thing is like a trial and error. So, and I'm learning with every mistake, and I'm changing with every iteration, with every sprint that we run. I kind of change the way I do things, and I kind of learn something from the last, or figure some things are bad, right? So I'm kind of trying to make a feel for it. And I'm just asking other developers and whoever I interview, I just trying to get a glimpse of their teams, because every team is kind of different. At least in my case, wherever I worked at, kind of had, a different set of coding standards and rules, and different, hierarchy, and how, where you are in the thing, and how you communicate with other developers. So every team is kind of different. It has its own quirks, right? And how it works. So the important thing is that what I usually preach is that it's not clean code as there's this ultimate clean code that's the best, cleanest code ever. It's clean code is about teamwork to me. And teamwork in what way? Teamwork that when I write the code, I want you, when you come in my code, to understand what exactly is going on there. And when I jump into your code, I want to know exactly what is going on there. And the developers change, we move. I don't want to be stuck into one corner doing one thing. Like, look, hey kid, you're in the back end. Like, deal with that. It's I like to jump around. I like to be a bit on the front end. I like to be a bit on the back end. So I like to go do different things and just keep me interested. If you're doing the same piece of code nonstop and you're the only one who knows that piece of code, you'll remain on that part of the system forever, right? So if you want to excel in a way, we all have to work as a team. So we all have to have a common language that all of us understand in a way.
Yeah, like what you said there, like you mentioned the rotten apple example before, and if you're on a team of 10 people and 9 of them write tests and you don't, you're going to feel bad and weird about that, and you're going to end up writing tests, right? So if you're working on a team and you're trying to change a team, then it's not really enough to just even change one person. Like you need to get the whole team kind of performing better in order to kind of raise that bar and get the standard up to a higher level. And so then when new people come on, or when people go to write more code, they've got this higher average now that they need to strive for, else they are obviously making things more dirty, and it becomes kind of harder culturally to do that. So I don't really know how to raise that bar, other than just really getting people together, having a lot of awkward conversations, and just putting in the sweat.
Yeah. So how do you deal with feelings? Like, there are a lot of developers who take it personally when you say, like, hey, your code is not working, and like, they have a fit, like, because I don't know, it's something silly, like either to fix or stuff like that. And I'm not trying to, I'm not taking on them personally. It's just, it has to be fixed. If it's a red flag, right? If it's not, if it's the naming and stuff like that, yeah. But Let's say you run into something that's really bad, and then they get offended because they think their code is the best. I mean, and there are people like that. I don't know if you run into, but I'm running into like on my day job.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. People, I really do think that people are the hardest part about working with computers, and it's just for things like that. Like I work with computers because I'm not particularly good at managing, feelings, or I don't even know if I should be trying to manage other people's feelings. I don't even know how that stuff works or how it's supposed to work. Like maybe I'm just broken. I don't know. But I do know, like when I'm working with people, I try to let them know when I meet them and when I work with them, I try to let people know I'm not going to be offended. I want you to be honest with me, and when you give me advice or you give me pointers, even if I disagree with you, I try to make a point to to try and listen and try to say thank you for that, even if I don't feel very thankful for it at the time. But on the other hand, as far as having to give that advice to other people, that's something I definitely struggle with. I don't know how to do that. And I think I probably let too many things go because I think, or I justify it by saying, well, they'll figure out eventually when they have to maintain it or something. I think that's just a cop out for me personally to not have to have those conversations because I've just never really developed that. And so I should probably take the same approach that I do to programming, and I should probably read books about it and practice and try to communicate with other people about it. But it doesn't sound like very much fun.
yeah. Well, I mean, it is fun. I mean, I don't know. I I have these long drives, like Orlando and around. So I'm cutting from South Orlando all the way to Altamont Springs. So I have an hour every day. So in order to use that time, I can listen to podcasts, educational like type programming podcasts or other podcasts. But I'm trying to keep my tools sharp. Let me put it like that. So we're always trying to excel. Um, which one do you prefer? Are you into this boat like of agile, DevOps, waterfall technique? I mean, before you even answer, I'm just gonna straight lay down my answer is that each one of those to me is a tool that accomplishes a certain task, and that's exactly how I see it. So if a waterfall method would work for me, I would use that. If an agile would work for me, I would use that. So depending on the client's requirements, that's how I approach it. What about you? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I'm been very lucky in my career to have worked with a lot of people who have been able to manage really well, kind of, and be really strong independent developers. I think I don't know if that's just in because of how I interact with other people, or if I've just been lucky. But I really have had a lot of luck with kind of self-organizing teams with a high level of autonomy. You find some people that really care about the product, and they can kind of help drive the things that are important for their areas, but they also have a good influence on the people around them. So that's my preference. But I know, especially as teams grow large, like maybe even more than 10 people, that gets to be pretty much impossible. And you can't just have 100 people or at the 18,000 people just doing whatever, makes sense to help the company. And, and you're asking some tough questions.
I should take that as a compliment then.
I can tell you lots of ways not to run teams, I suppose. But I tell my least favorite is probably the most common, which is Agile with deadlines.
Okay, yeah, definitely, I agree with that one.
Yeah, and but I don't know how else you run a business and stay agile. And I think agile is super important, even though it's frustrating sometimes. And I would love to have everything kind of written down on a spreadsheet and with little dates, and I'd love to check those boxes as we pass them, and I'd love to get ahead. That sounds fantastic. But I also I hate the idea of having people, the stakeholders or the customers, coming to me and saying there's a problem with something, and me saying, well, I'm sorry, maybe next release 7 months from now we can get around to that.
Yeah. On the next sprint, like I don't have that sticky note yet to put on my board, like done and complete. I know.
Yeah.
No, exactly. So, are you more fan of corporate or a startup environment?
I definitely like startups. I tend to be kind of independent, and I like people that can be independent, and people who really care and have a lot of ownership in the things that they're doing, and really kind of feel in the spirit. And it's my experience in larger teams. It just, you can't have huge numbers of people. It takes all types, but you don't have the kind of same team spirit once the companies get large. I've worked on teams with like 100 developers, and there's a lot of personalities in there, and there's a lot of stuff to learn from. But it's just such a mix that I just never really kind of felt that same level of team spirit that I do with a smaller company. So that's definitely my preference.
Yeah, the way I see it, like in a big company, usually you kind of specialize yourself in a certain area, right? So, and in a startup environment, you can kind of wear more hats. You can do a lot of things. You can learn a lot in that way. So it's more broader and specialized knowledge. That's how I kind of see them. And of course, you're working like with a bunch of people, so it's more like corporate and it's more rules and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, and I
but
totally
yeah,
agree with that. And I think a lot of the controversy over like full stack developers comes from people who are more used to seeing one side or the other. And so there's people maybe in larger companies that say, of course you have to specialize. You're crazy to think you can learn everything. And there's people at working on teams with two other developers are saying, are you crazy? I can't specialize because I want to be able to take a day off.
but it's also a question: what is a full stack developer? Like today, it's not the same thing it was. I don't know, 5 years ago, probably.
Yeah, I don't. Have you ever seen the roadmaps for front end development and back end development?
No, I'm not sure what you're talking about. So,
There's like a big diagram that made its way around Reddit a couple months. I can send you a link, but it's just got a bunch of boxes, and it's good. Like when you look at it, it's pretty overwhelming. When I look at the back end, I say full stack, but I'm definitely one of those full stack developers that has a much more stronger presence in the back end. If I can just add checkboxes and make forms work on the front end, so I call myself full stack. But if you just look at that list of boxes, it's crazy just to see how much there is, and to think like, oh, I've been working I think like 18, 19 years now in development, and I can look at just one half of this diagram and realize that I don't know, 2/3 of it. I've never worked with 2/3 of it. It's just crazy to me to think that I can spend this long. And even the 1/3 of the areas that I am in, I still don't feel like I've really mastered most of them.
yeah. I mean, before I thought like the full stack developer was someone who like does everything from the database, which I kind of do, like from C sharp SQL all the way back end, and then go up to the front end and do like JavaScript, jQuery, or whatever today, like Angular, Vue, and all that jazz. But that kind of changed. Now you have full stack developers who do like who have an entire like I don't know Node.js stack, right?
Yeah, that's actually a big part of the reason that kind of when listening to your show, one of the questions I kind of wanted to ask you is something that I fear a lot. Maybe this is just my own security speaking, but I wanted to ask you what you thought of the roles between like back end and front end. Like, is the back end losing ground to the front end, do you think, or you think it's about even or other way?
That's exactly what I was thinking about. So, what I kind of look at it is you have a front end, right? Front end technologies, there are like millions of them. Every year there's a new thing. And now you can like build a website in basically a couple of clicks, right? You get set up. It takes way more time to implement those features in the back end. So it kind of feels like the back end is kind of falling behind, but also does it fall behind? Do you think that? Like,
Yeah, so I did some kind of brainstorming, and the reason I think that is a lot of times I see someone who says they're a React developer, and then I watch the projects that they bang out in a week, and it looks amazing, and it has a backend. They found services like I don't know, doing stuff with Git or Auth0 or Let's Encrypt and Shopify. These are things that like I used to do those things for work. I used to make shopping carts. I used to install certificates on servers, and now they're doing these things with clicks, and so it makes it feel like my job is becoming commoditized by these quality services that do better jobs than I ever could anyway. So that's really scary to me. But then at the same time, I think about things like machine learning or AI or real time, even graph databases, time series databases, search engines, so stuff like that that I think is still kind of at the core of backend development. And those things are still alive and strong, and there's a lot of work to do there, and it's really hard work. And so I feel as long as I'm still kind of paying attention and not or not getting comfortable and just kind of trying to keep on top of the trends and moving to where the work is, I think I'll be okay. But I'm not certain.
yeah, that's the healthiest approach. I mean, just try, uh, do the work, but don't get comfortable. I think that's kind of the best thing. So always try to keep on top. And I think you said it best. So the front end, they're going like really fast, but I think always in the industry, the way I see it is that front end is up close to the customer. So the customers are kind of dictating how it should look. But on the other hand, let's take web development, for example. Like, you still are making, the same requests, post and get in the backend and the web API. So that didn't change. The only thing that it changed was the front end. So it's fluff. I mean, it's like that. There was the other day, I think I saw, like, there was a view kind of form where you have some kind of a Yeti looking at your password and then covering their eyes, and when you're typing in the password, and then when you click, so there's a whole set of animations, right? It looks really cool. I loved it. But the thing is, so you go to the management meeting, right? And you sit down and you say, like, look, I want to make this form for our, next iteration in the next sprint, right? And they're like, okay, how much time would it take that? Well, we need to find not graphic designer, but we need to find an animator who will animate that. Not a Yeti, so now we need something special. Okay, how long would that take? Like, well, that would take like a couple of weeks, right? And how much would that cost us, right? You see where I'm getting at with it. Like, I think the management would rather invest their resources into something that is, if they're burning issues that need to be fixed. Like, you can have the prettiest login screen, but if after you log in it says hello world, what's the point of it? So that it's all about the balance. I mean, when you think at it, like, yes, customers always drove the visits to the website. So you have this front end where they're communicating. The back end kind of stayed the same, and will stay the same probably for a while. So now you had, like, what it was, Ajax, then you have WebSockets now, and that's pretty much it. But it's still the same. Like, so in the backend you can have whatever you want as long as it accepts that message, right?
Yeah, I've heard that they say UI code is the most expensive because it doesn't stick around very long. You write it, and 3 months later you rewrite it, and then 3 months later there's a lot of backend code. Like, once you get it working, you kind of set it up. You can set it up in a closet, and hopefully you never have to touch it again, and it might still work 10 years later.
I mean, look at it this way: you have on the backend side. So let's play the devil's advocate. I mean, you can stick around with one technology as well, but we also have to be on our toes, right? So we're always keeping track of what's the latest and greatest and fastest. So usually database technologies is what changes the most. So if we get a faster database, we'll get a faster database, right? But you can also work in COBOL if you want. Even today, like, there are companies probably that'll pay a ton of money just to work in COBOL. That'll even teach you just to be there, and you'll be set for life probably, because even to this day, you have banks that run those mainframe computers that run on COBOL still to this day. And there are even some health institutions that run on COBOL. So, and a COBOL is like, what, a 50-year-old language, right?
Yeah, 68, I think. I just happened to look that up the other day. So yeah, 1968. So a long time ago.
So yeah, I mean, so yes, you can stick with one technology, but you always have to learn. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard being also a front-end developer, right? At the same time. This year you're doing something, but next year you're doing something else. But as a result, it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, one thing that kind of ticks me off personally, there's a lot of, in the front-end technology, there's a like war of marketing in a way. So which front end has the best, marketing team? So it's about the logo, it's about the sticker, it's about which one is the best and most prominent, and then and which is supported by the biggest companies. And I think a lot of people get lost in that because they have to take this into account. Those tools like React, for example, was developed by Facebook, right? And it was developed by Facebook because they wanted to solve a particular problem. And then at a certain point, they figured out, oh, we can outsource this, right? So, and that's how it kind of lifted off. So all those technologies are solving a particular problem, but they won't solve all the problems, and probably they'll create new problems.
Yeah, for sure. I'll say it is nice to be able to hire for. So I think when I'm trying to make my decision on a front end framework, I try to go with whatever's most popular, unless there's a really strong reason to go with another one. If it comes down to just trying to decide between two things that are similar, I just look at Stack Overflow survey results of what's more popular because I just want to be able to hire people for it. And when I've got people working on it, I want them to be able to Google for it. So that's been my kind of determining factor. But like React and Vue kind of seem neck and neck right now, and so honestly, I would probably go with React just because of the Facebook backing. Although there's people I know that would go with Vue specifically because of the Facebook backing.
Yeah, I'm on the other hand. I mean, the way I would pick like my front end, I would pick my front end is what kind of UI I need. So I want to look at my problem that I'm solving. So I want to look, okay, I want to build this XYZ type of website, right? What kind of UI would solve that problem? Like if it's gonna, if the old school, what is the .NET web pages would solve that problem, I would build them that. Of course they wouldn't, but I'm just caricaturizing it. But you know what I mean? It's like it doesn't have to be the latest and greatest always. But yet again, a lot of people are now following the latest and greatest, so you have to kind of follow with that, right? So otherwise you won't be able to find developers, right? If I put like Angular 1.6 and everyone will laugh in my face. So, yeah, which they, by the way, did on one of the meetups. Like, so when they asked me, like, I was fresh off the boat, like I just came to Orlando, right? And I started working. This company had a lot of projects that were Angular 1.6, and they needed help with that, so I was working on that, right? So it was, and when I told someone on the meetup, they looked at me and scoffed, like, "Oh, peasant," something along those lines. Like, Jesus Christ, like, it's not that bad. I mean, it's sometimes the company also dictates the technology. They also have to be aware of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who still are working on products that aren't even on the web, and so I don't know. That's kind of a bad attitude to have. I think to think that you can scoff at anyone for what they're working on, because there's all sorts of different reasons for why you might have stuck with for Angular 1.6. It really kind of speaks to what kind of environment they work in. Like I would think with someone taking that kind of attitude that they're probably doing something like delivering small websites, boutique websites every 3 months, and so to them it seems ridiculous that anyone would work on anything more than a couple years old. But to someone who's working on a big project that might be huge, millions of lines of code, and it's been in production and being worked on by 60 people over the last 10 years, it's ridiculous to think that you would change your front end framework every couple months, right?
Yeah, and you kind of brought me in to the next point I wanted to talk about. It's like, how often do these companies change their front end technology? I mean, some websites are being built over the years. The company I worked for in 2012, we were building that site still runs today, and then every client had a different website on their end. So we were preloading like the assets, like CSS and the JS files and stuff like that. But changing all of that, it's not like snap of the fingers. You have to do a lot of work in order to change all of those clients in one. So it makes me wonder, like, how often, because we talked about falling behind, like backend falling behind, but it's also the front end that's kind of falling behind when you think about it. Is like you have these big companies who started off with the front end, let's say React. They already like chewed it up and like already done to it. So it's now the latest and greatest to everyone else. And now companies are like, because it's latest and greatest, they are kind of forcing their developers to change that front end to the latest and greatest, right? So there's more work to be done. And it's kind of a vicious cycle, because now that your company is changing to the latest and greatest, not Angular, but React, Facebook is already 3 steps ahead and working on something else. I mean, they have the manpower, of course, to do that, and which is great. I'm grateful because, like I said, they are kind of solving a problem for them, a particular problem for them when they designed React. Just so it happened to be that they're also solving one of our problems, right? When rendering and doing all that jazz. But I don't know. It just, do you feel like we're always so cascading like behind, and this is gonna go on for eternity like this, like that. We're always gonna have new front ends and new back ends, and then, but it's always gonna be dictated by the bigger companies in a way.
Yeah, that's really tough. I think we've gotten to a point where open source where it's really hard for one person to make a huge difference or a huge splash with like one new big tool or one new big framework. Like if you were going to write a new database, backend database system right now, first of all, it has to be significantly better than everything that's already existing, because everything already existing has people that know how to use it, that have the answers on Stack Overflow. And so you've almost got to be like 10 times better, 10 times faster, 10 times more secure, just to even have a chance at competing with them because they're already entrenched. And then on top of it, you also have to have really great documentation and getting started guides and YouTube videos, and you have to be the kind of person that can go and get people excited. And so it's really hard for any individual, I think, to really make huge waves with a dramatic, life-changing kind of big software. And I think that's really sad, because it does mean it's being left up to the big companies, Facebook, Google, Amazon. And I hate that the innovation is coming from them. And that's actually one thing I really like and respect about the front end, is that it's, I think, easier for them because they've got some of those kind of skills around making things more visual and kind of bringing people in. And I think they do have more chances to make little smaller libraries that do have a big impact on people's lives. Like every NuGet package I install or NPM package I install is like, it's a discussion. It's people have to think about it, have to talk about it. We have to look at the security. We have to really think about it. On the front end, I see people adding packages like there's no tomorrow. It's not really a big thing, because a lot of times they're not really too concerned about the security because it's happening on the front end. And so their liability is kind of limited there. And it means that they can be more experimentative, I guess, with front end code, which leads to innovation, which can still be done by smaller people. So I'm jealous of that for sure. But at the same time, I'm really happy with the back-end technologies that I have, and I'm glad that they're mature and well-documented, and that they just work. And I think Docker in particular has been like the most exciting thing for me that's happened probably since Git, because it means that I can spin up these back-end services that I used to just read about and think were so cool or think would be a good fit. Now I can kind of Docker run them and give them a shot here in a few minutes after it finishes downloading, and things are work, they're documented, they're standardized in a way that I understand. And so I feel like Docker in particular has empowered me as a backend developer, coming from a backend mindset, to be able to kind of have some of that agility that I've seen on the front end for so long. And so now if I want to try standing up, I don't know, what's a cool new database like Snowball or something, I don't even know what the cool hot new databases are, but if I wanted to, if I Googled it and figured it out, I could spin those up in just a few minutes, assuming they have images on Docker Hub, and I'm sure they do. And I can give that a go, and I can give that architecture a try, and that's really powerful, that I can stitch these big hulking machines together in order to see if that's something that might have wings. And before, that used to be, I don't know, I can't even imagine how much effort it used to take to set up different versions of operating systems, install the right versions of Java and the right services and the certificates, and get them all talking together. And so I'm really excited about what that means for the future of backend.
Yeah, it's like Legos. Basically, you build your own system. But speaking of latest and greatest, like this perked my ears recently. I want to get into it. Have you ever dabbled into WebAssembly?
Oh, just I've had it as an output target. It's like messing around with, like, say, Unity 3D or something. I can say output, and I love that I could play a game in the browser. And I've heard things about, Blazor and whatnot, and some of the other cool things I've heard about companies being able to take applications like AutoCAD that were written in like native C, C++ code and get versions of them running up on the web without making that many changes. And so I don't even know what the future holds for us now.
Yeah, that sounds and this sounds like making a full circle with the WebAssembly, or getting back to the roots in a way. But yeah, I'm excited for it. I want to do some more research on it. I recently heard about it, and I was reading lightly about it, but I want to get more into it. But yeah,
we talked about not getting too comfortable, and so it sounds like one of those things. Like if it sounds uncomfortable and weird to you, but people are still talking about it 3 months after the Hacker News article comes out, then it's probably worth spending some time there, because that might be something that really changes how your day-to-day job works, 5 years from now.
But speaking of day job and stuff like that. How do you organize your time in all of this? Like,
Oh, poorly.
Poorly? Yeah.
Poorly. I spend too much time at the computer, and my wife is very forgiving.
No, you don't have a system like, okay, this day I'm going to do this, and weekly planning and stuff like that. It's just wing it.
I've tried just about everything, getting things done. I've read all those kind of popular kind of organization books, and I just haven't been very good at it. So I do try to kind of keep a list of the things that are most important on a daily and weekly basis, and to try and just make sure that I get those things accomplished. But I like to try and leave wiggle room in. But I've been failing at that lately, especially like doing a podcast, doing the job, doing research on the side for both of those. I just tend to spend too much time. And so, I'm going to be one of those people that on their deathbed says they wish they had worked less.
Yeah. And so getting back to the printing technology, so they change constantly. But in a way, I'm kind of also a believer of Uncle Bob's words. I don't know if you ever heard one of his talks, but he's like, if I put you like on a different programming language, it would take you a while to get used to it. Maybe it would take you a day, but then you would be coding again. So he has that belief, like even if I kind of brought you back to the old days and the old school assembly and put you in front of it and taught you how to write code in it, and within a day you would write the code. It won't be as comfortable as it is a Visual Studio, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of a believer of that. So you always kind of have to train yourself to be adaptable. Do you think that as well, or?
I do, but I also think things have gotten really complicated as far as like frameworks go. And so I can write a for loop in a bunch of different languages without thinking about it. Even day to day, I write C#, I write JavaScript, sometimes some other languages like Java or whatever. Going between C# and Java, the for loops are fine. The if statements, the class names, even the coding conventions, I got it, no problem. But I spent a lot of time wrestling with things like the build system in Java, like Maven or Gradle or whatever it is for that whatever project I'm in. And it's probably because I just don't spend a lot of time in that ecosystem. Whenever I'm kind of hopping in there, it's to do some sort of like little kind of integration job, and then I'm out. And so I don't spend enough time there, but it's been really frustrating for me. And even JavaScript, I play around with JavaScript a lot just for fun. And anytime I need to go mess around with like a Webpack configuration, it's a nightmare. So while I know how to, write my for loops, I know how to map and reduce and all that fun stuff, I spend a lot of time on the frameworks now, which is unfortunate because that's not fun work. I would much rather be doing kind of coding fundamentals, algorithms and design patterns. But I keep finding myself spending more and more time every year on these kind of configurations, which is not very fun.
Yeah, it's one of those things like, oh, I'll remember it like next time because I did it like 15 times. And then, here you are again, like looking, searching through the internet, like the simplest stuff. But it's goes same way. So if I told you now you have to do, I don't know, Java for the rest of your, for the rest of the year, you would do Java for the rest of the year. You wouldn't have a problem with it. But then you would have a problem getting back to C# because you'll forget everything that you did with C#. So, but that's the nature. I mean, it's like languages. I mean, I when I was in Serbia, like I spoke French, and I could speak French and I can understand it. Now, because I don't have a contact with that language at all, right? And I completely forgot the language. English, I'm in contact with it every day. And every day I'm like trying to perfect the language as much as I can, right? I'm still fumbling all over the place and I still have an accent, but probably I'm never going to get rid of it. But it's the same principle. So you always have to, even though you know 15 languages, you have to keep all of them sharp in a way, right? Which is hard, which is getting harder and getting harder and harder. But does that bring a problem for hiring? So now on the other side, when you're hiring people, how do you position yourself like, okay, I need to find developers, but is it always a big problem like to find developers because now there's like so many technologies and you kind of know the basic technology stack, but you don't know like more in depth now? So even the managers now have to be in like check with the latest and greatest, right? So now it's like spreading. It's like more people in the chain need to know more stuff about it, right?
It's really tough, but I have so much better luck, and I've seen so much better luck with just referrals. So if I have the choice of like looking through a stack of 100 resumes or asking the people on the team that I like who they might recommend, I'm much more likely to go with a recommendation if they say, well, this person's great, but they haven't worked with whatever technology before. I'm much more forgiving of that than I am of wanting to take a chance on a resume, because I've seen hires that look great on paper just end up being terrible. So having that word of mouth still feels better. And that doesn't scale though. So as you get larger, that's more and more of a problem. But as long as I can stick to these smaller companies, I much prefer going out, meeting people, getting to like talk with smart developers like yourself. And so now if a job position comes up with C Sharp, I know someone to recommend who might be able to steal. So that's how I definitely prefer to keep things, but I know that's unrealistic sometimes. And so I have sympathy for the people that aren't in that position.
Yeah, my story is like my first job through Craigslist.
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed to say it, but but second job I got through Slack and through networking. So it kind of works both ways, right? LinkedIn never worked for me. So all of those are like bigger websites don't work for me. I don't work with recruiters, so I'm trying to avoid them, but yeah, that's a whole different story. But there's also another movement like where this younger developer, I forgot his name, but anyway, he's like enforcing other developers if they say like, I don't know, 10 years in .NET Core, which is impossible, but anyway, if they say that, like, put it like that. So you have people who are purposely lying on their resumes.
Yeah.
And you have people who are honest and then they never get picked because XYZ, because of that. And now you have also on top of that, there are so many resumes flying around that you have these automated systems that don't work that good. So you even have to cheat that system, so now you have to learn how to cheat a particular system to get your resume through, which is like to get to a real person. So it's getting, I kind of think it's getting harder and harder because, there are more developers in the world, but it's like also the whole technology mess now, or technology stack mess is making it harder, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And one idea I've kind of had on hiring, I haven't tried this yet. I don't know anyone who's tried it yet, but a lot of people, when I talk to them, they're talking about looking for a job or whatever. They kind of, if they're in the position where they're looking for a job, they start looking at the hired.coms or the LinkedIn's or places like that. I kind of like the idea, at least if you are planning on working locally, of always knowing the top 3, say, employers in your area that you would want to work for. So go to the meetups, talk to people, just make a little list. Like, these are the 3 companies, if I got fired tomorrow, that I would actively want to work for, and list the kind of challenges that you think and the kind of technologies that they work with. And you don't have to spend hours on it, but I think it would buy you a lot of peace of mind. I think a lot of people would feel better if they just kind of had that list around to know, okay, if something happened tomorrow, this is where I want to go. Because otherwise, if you get fired or you end up in a position where you need to find a new job really quickly, then you could end up going somewhere coincidentally based on who's hiring at that moment. And that could be really bad for you. And you could miss out on, say, potential opportunities that may start hiring tomorrow just because they weren't available at the time that you saw them.
I don't know. It's a toughie. Let's bring it to a finisher right now. So we're coming close to an hour. So you have a busy schedule. You're all over the place. But when do you have time to educate yourself? Do you do it like during work hours? Do you do it off hours? When do you do it?
That's a good question, especially since I've been working with newer technologies to me that I haven't known a lot about. I feel really guilty. I can't imagine watching like an 8-hour course on the class. Or a 8-hour course on the clock. That just feels totally foreign to me, although I can absolutely justify it and say, it makes sense for me to spend this time learning this stuff up front rather than trying to get my fingers on the keyboard immediately and spending all my time, that 8 hours plus some on Stack Overflow rather than just learning things the right way the first time. So I think, realistically, I'd love to be able to say, yes, you should be able to have dedicated training time on the clock, and companies, especially if you're working on newer projects, should be cognizant and aware and encourage that. Because I always think, the worst thing you could do is not train somebody and have them leave, but rather have somebody never learn anything new and have them stay. That's always really scary to me. But, realistically, I spend a lot of time, kind of listening to podcasts or, reading blogs, whatever, in the kind of the mornings between work or before work or the evenings after work, whatever. So I don't think that's healthy, but that's what I do.
Yeah, it's the same here. So, during work, after work, I mean, as long as I'm not like doing 8 hours of researching, quote unquote, then you're playing Minecraft or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
But everything else, yeah. I mean, and you want your, developers, you want them to expand their skills, right, as well. So you don't want them like doing only one set of skills. So if they want to learn something new, yeah, I'm supportive of that all the time. Well, do you have any good books that you can recommend? We mentioned like Clean Code. We mentioned Agile. No, I always mix it up, Lean and Agile development. But what reading materials do you have to recommend to any developers that would like to learn more about, coding or any other tech book that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I'll just say my favorite tech book is Pragmatic Programmer, so everyone should read that. But the book I really want to tell you about is called Badass, Making Users Awesome, which is more of a kind of a marketing book, but I actually think it's really applicable for programming. And it's been kind of eye-opening for me. I've been really enjoying it. It's got a lot of pictures in it too, which I like. But the whole premise of the book is really just talking about how when you have a product or you're making a product or a service, the marketing and the service and products that you build aren't about you, but rather about what your users can do. And so it kind of it's been an interesting mental shift for me to kind of read about that. And maybe other people kind of just know this intuitively, and I've been missing it all this time. But it's kind of changed how I think about the things that I deliver. And so it's less about me trying to show how cool the features I can deliver are, and more about trying to make the people I'm delivering those to, making them feel good and powerful and cool. And so it doesn't really sound like that much of a difference, but just reading through the book, I think it's got a pretty profound outcome on the way I've kind of thought about things. And so I've noticed myself making some actual changes in my life after reading it, which is, I think, the kind of highest praise I can give to a book is that I read it and I actually made changes. So I'm really excited about that book, and I actually want to reread it already.
Besides the awesome name, I definitely want to read it. So I'm definitely interested in it. So a bit controversial. Like, do you think that does the school degree matter, or does it?
So I never graduated. Well, I was a senior, and I got close. But as far as your question goes, no, I don't think. My time in university was fun, and I liked the computer science classes that I took, and I felt like I learned things that I've kept, and I'm glad for it. But I don't think it's been necessary for my career. Really, I think especially with more and more information and courses online, I think people can find the kinds of information that are more flexible and more kind of adequate to their needs. And so, I think that the universities and colleges are like one good way to go. And if that works for you, that's great. But I don't think that's the only way to go.
I don't know, but do you think you can become a developer in 30 days?
The 30 days? No. I can't imagine 30 days. And I've had some kind of mixed experiences with boot camps, but overall, those are kind of like shorter programs typically that are kind of tend to be more practical focused rather than like, say, theoretical. Some of the best people I've worked with in newer years and newer developers have come out of boot camps, but I don't think it was the boot camp that made them magical, awesome coders. I think there were people that really just got in there and cared and were inquisitive and tried to break things and tried to change things and tried to do things a little bit differently and went outside the bonds of their assignments. And so I've seen that the boot camps have done great things for them because it gave them the background info and kind of showed them how to get started, and they just took it and ran. And I've seen other people that have gone through and kind of come out the other side of the boot camp like waiting to get their job and not really caring much about programming. And in those cases, I don't think it worked well for them because it was expensive. It took a couple months of their life, and they came out of it just kind of, at the beginning of understanding how to even work. And so, I hate that it didn't work out well for them. And so I think a lot of it just kind of has to do with like your personality and the way that you work and the way that things work and how you learn. And so, I don't, if anyone's, considering going to a boot camp or something who might be listening to the show, I think you really got to kind of know a little bit about yourself and the kinds of environments that do well for you.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's not about the education. I mean, yes, I grinded until I got a master's degree, right? So I went all the way there. But I learned how to think more meta, and I think that the last 2 years of my university were the most like epiphany moments. But that's not the point. The thing I'm learning, and the thing I learned like after I got out my university, so I spent like, I don't know, more than 5 years definitely. But the thing I learned is how much I didn't know at the time, right? So when I started working, I learned how much I didn't know, and then I had to relearn everything. Not relearn, but learn and learn and learn. And that drive, constantly learning, is what kind of kept me in the game, and that's what everyone needs to do. Like, even when you're getting out of a boot camp, if you really like programming, if you really like what you learn, hit the ground running, keep on learning, and you'll become a better developer. So can a developer in 30 days become a super senior developer, or climb up the ranks? Yeah, but it depends on them and depends on the work ethics they have. So it's not just like, okay, I learned programming and then sit and do nothing. You're just gonna get stale pretty soon. This industry is like constantly changing, and that it's gonna roll you over, basically.
Well, the good news is, if you're listening to this podcast right now, then you probably went out, sought it out, and looked for different ways that you could find to learn to be a better programmer and experimenting in different mediums. And so just by kind of listening to this show, you're already kind of showing that you're one of the people that we're kind of talking about, who is kind of self-motivated and willing to put into the work. So you can pat yourself on the back.
You mentioned like great podcasts to listen to. I know Coding Blocks is a great podcast to listen to.
Oh, thanks.
Also, as well, any hobbies? What do you do like in your spare time? Like, we're all human. I mean, we all kind of need to unwind somewhere, right?
Yep, and of course I do like video games, particularly the Switch, because I can play on the couch and while watching, Bravo. But also lately, I've been really trying to kind of focus on some skills that I've had. Like, I started playing guitar in high school, but I've been kind of trying to get back and focus a little, kind of learn how to do things the right way. And lately in particular, I've been playing a lot of bass. And I've been trying to learn how to slap. So I've never liked the kind of music that really had a lot of kind of slapping in it, and so I've always just kind of avoided it. But lately, I've been just trying to learn, just because it's always been a big hole kind of in my skill set there, and so that's been kind of fun. But it's driving my wife crazy, I'm sure, to hear me kind of up here, just hear those frets slapping all the time.
That sounds great. One thing that I can kind of advise you on that is like what I did is, those scales are boring, so you're always playing scale up and down and learning like different tones and stuff like that. So let's say you learn a different scale. You can find, like on YouTube, for example, that's what I do usually. Like on YouTube, I find a lot of backing tracks in a certain key, right? And if it's in that certain key that I need, and then just I doodle is the different thing, but noodle around like different tones from that. I learned that scale, so from that scale, and you make it fun. You make it musical, and you can enjoy it. And that I sit and do like that for 2 hours, like I'm just doodling around and having fun, and you feel like a rock star. I mean, that's the cool piece, because you kind of have the whole orchestra backing music, and then you came in with this wicked solo, which is like basically noodling around the scale notes. And it doesn't have to be Van Halen. It's like something like simpler for starters, and then you build up on that, and then you build up speed, and then it helps you with time.
Yeah, that's better my strategy of finding some weird band with an obscure like time signature and then trying to jam along with it and being confused the whole time and frustrating quitting.
Well, okay, that's kind of going too high. Like, okay, that's like, I mean, that's what I did with bass. Like, I'm gonna cover Tool, and then I started doing like, okay, hang on, like slow down a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, they say to practice at the edge of your abilities, not way past them.
Yeah, exactly. So make you feel uncomfortable, but not, not in pain. Let me put it like that. So especially
Yep.
when you grab those like chords and stuff like that, it's crazy. So where can people find you? Where can people find coding blocks? And I don't know any other links that you would like to plug in also as well.
All right, sure. Yeah, I mean, it really, most of my kind of social energy goes into at coding blocks. So you can usually find me kind of tweeting around there. And even if I'm not the one behind the at that day, I'm never too far away from it. So if you just kind of at me on there, or if you just kind of Google around whatever social platform you prefer, I'm usually not too far away from that.
Okay, well, yeah, and something outside the world of programming that you would like to share?
I don't know, spay and neuter your pets, I guess.
Okay, well, that's a thing, so why not?
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Joe, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Listeners, we had some technical difficulties. Hopefully, by the time you hear this end result, it will all sound nice and clean. But yeah, it was a challenge tonight. We had our fair share with network connections and stuff like that. So, but thank you again, Joe, for being on the show. I really enjoyed talking to you. I think it was. I learned a lot. I hope also the listeners also learned a lot as well.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really love the show, and so it was great to be on.
That was a great episode. I really had fun talking to Joe. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And let's just end it with the way things are now. There's always going to be front end and back end development. The fast-paced front end or full stack development will not make the back end development obsolete. Which doesn't mean you should stick to only one technology. You should always keep learning new technologies and acquiring new skills to make you a better developer. You need to be ready because things change. Things change really fast. And like I said in the intro, this is the way technology is today and the availability of different tools, and makes building a website a breeze. If you have a startup company, you can launch it within a week and you'll be good to go. But on the other hand, you have a lot of companies that already have existing systems and they don't want to change to new technologies that often. So it's always a balance. So you'll always have, the newest, but you'll have the older technologies. So you just have to think of that as well when you talk to other people. And don't be a technology snob. Always be considerate of other developers. And they come from other walks of life. Some companies don't allow different technologies. Your technology might be the hottest thing going on right now, but probably next year it's not going to be. And remember, always pick your technologies that solve your particular problem. So if an older technology might solve a problem that you're facing now, use that. If you need the latest and greatest because it'll solve a different problem than you're having, then okay. Because every technology, it solves one problem, but probably introduces 2 or 3 more. Thank you for listening to an episode of Backend Bear Podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Backend Bear and on Facebook at Backend Bear Podcast. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to send them via Twitter or just email me at marco@backendbear.com. Any other information or anything that you would like to know, it can be found at backendbear.com. Thank you again, and until next time, ta-da!